It is May 20, 2009. Four black men from Newburgh, New York, are arrested outside a synagogue in the Bronx. At a press conference, officials detail a plot to bomb the building and shoot down military aircraft. The media goes wall to wall. The country exhales. The FBI stopped them. There is just one problem. The entire plot, from the initial concept to the staffing and the funding, was conceived and directed by the United States government. The targets were chosen by the FBI. The explosives were fake, supplied by the FBI. The missile was fake. The FBI provided it. The men they arrested were entirely incapable of planning an attack on their own. One of them, Laguerre Pan, had schizophrenia and an intellectual disability. Another was desperately poor and had been bribed with $250,000 by the government's informant. The government didn't catch an active terror cell. They financed and produced a fake one, using some of society's most vulnerable citizens as their actors. This reliance on the highly vulnerable is a repeated tactic. Take the case of Rezwan Ferdows, a 26-year-old Massachusetts man with a physics degree who was visibly deteriorating from severe mental illness. As the FBI's informant relentlessly pressured Ferdows to participate in a fake plot, Ferdows began to physically break down. He suffered seizures. He lost bladder control. His weight plummeted so drastically that his cheekbones protruded. The FBI knew exactly what was happening. An agent admitted to Ferdows's father that Rezwan obviously had mental issues. They kept pushing the plot forward anyway. Ferdows was eventually sentenced to 17 years in federal prison. 14 years after the Newburgh men were arrested, a federal judge ordered 3 of them released. Judge Colleen McMahon described the men as hapless, easily manipulated, and penurious petty criminals. She wrote that they had served their time for starring in the government's made-for-TV movie. The American justice system functions as a production studio. It casts desperate, disabled people to play the role of monsters and locks them in cages when the cameras stop rolling. Investigative journalist Trevor Aronson spent years compiling a database of federal terrorism prosecutions. He identified at least 50 defendants who were put on trial for conduct that was entirely initiated, planned, and enabled by an FBI informant. After September 11, 2001, the FBI shifted its mandate from reacting to crimes to preventing them before they occurred. To justify a massive new counterterrorism budget, a preventative agency needs future criminals. This dataset of 646 federal terrorism cases analyzed by the Georgetown Law Journal maps exactly who is targeted. As this towering column shows, Black Muslims were over 3 times more likely to exhibit entrapment indicators than white non-Muslims. To find these targets, the FBI deploys heavily paid informants, who are often serious criminals themselves. The informant who steered Rezwan Ferdows into his 17-year sentence was a convicted robber and an active heroin user, whom the FBI paid $50,000. The counterterrorism machine is driven by quotas. The government pays criminals to locate and manipulate marginalized people, so the bureaucracy can demonstrate results. The law technically provides a defense against this, entrapment. But to successfully argue entrapment, a defendant must prove they lacked predisposition. Predisposition is a legal standard requiring you to show you had no prior inclination to commit the crime before the government intervened. Prosecutors use a target's own speech to establish this inclination. If a paid informant spends months pushing a target to express anger about foreign policy, the government then presents those coaxed statements in court as proof the target was inherently guilty from the start. This animation tallies the outcomes of that legal standard. Out of hundreds of federal terrorism convictions recorded since September 11th, the number of acquittals based solely on entrapment grounds remains exactly 0. The legal framework is mathematically rigged to protect the government's deception. The defense exists on paper, but it never works in practice. The state dedicates enormous resources to hunting vulnerable Muslim and Black men in mosque parking lots, while operating with a glaring blind spot toward actual, capable domestic threats. It took an actual violent mob of right-wing extremists physically breaching the United States Capitol on January 6th for the federal government to slightly adjust its targeting calculus. Operating for years without serious domestic oversight, this tactic has mutated. The FBI launched Operation Trojan Shield, centered around a platform called Anam. Anam was an encrypted communications company built, owned, and operated entirely by international law enforcement. The government marketed these secure phones directly to criminal networks worldwide. They moved from running isolated stings to operating the precise criminal infrastructure they are mandated to dismantle. The machinery of entrapment has escaped its borders. A system trained to manufacture crime in America now operates unchecked on a global scale. In 1932, the Supreme Court established that the function of law enforcement is the prevention of crime and the apprehension of criminals. They noted explicitly that this function manifestly does not include the manufacturing of crime. We ignored that rule. We spent 20 years building a terrorism factory, disguised it as national security, and told ourselves we were safe. James Cromitty, the fourth man from Newburgh, is still in federal prison. He has a release date of 2030 for a plot the government invented. Shahid Hussein, the FBI informant who engineered that entire plot, faced a very different outcome. He fled to Pakistan after a limousine company he was involved with caused a crash in upstate New York that killed 20 people. He has never been brought back. The state's manufactured terrorist rots in a cage. The state's actual criminal walks free.